Hello and welcome to another video review. This is Doom 3 for PC and Xbox. Now when this came out in 2004, it was 10 years after Doom 2 was released, and it was obviously a technological milestone because the id Tech released their new engine at the time, which was id Tech 4, and that was Doom 3 was the first game to use that, and it went on to power Quake 4 as well, and now they're on id Tech 5 with Rage. But in addition to the technological jump forward at the time, they also changed the style of play from the previous Doom games quite a bit, and this game ended up getting both positive press and negative press. It seems like the player base kind of is either it's an average game or it's mediocre, and the reviewers were all like, "Oh, it's amazing, it's wonderful, it's a great first-person shooter." And so the question becomes, what is it really? Now, like I said, this was a technological milestone, and the graphics at the time were absolutely amazing, and hardly anything could actually run this on the max settings at the time. A couple years later, we're running stuff at max, and it looks great still. And even today, it does not look bad. Now, some of the textures are a little low-res, some of the models are a little weird-looking, animations could be a little better, but at the time, it looked absolutely phenomenal. Especially the lighting and that such thing, the particle effect and such, those all look phenomenal. And then there was the sound design, which was kind of all over the place. On the one point, you had actual voice acting this time around, and it wasn't bad. It wasn't great either, but it wasn't bad. It was just kind of that run-of-the-mill voice acting kind of stuff. Sound effects were actually kind of wimpy. I was kind of surprised by this. I thought that the sound effects would take a note from the original two Doom games and be absolutely amazing, but in this one they toned it down quite a bit. There are a few weapons that sound really nice, there are a few that don't. The ambient sounds are just kind of and they really went for the more horror aspect this time around, so they went for a lot more trying to scare you. And the problem is that the sound effects come across as a little cheesy sometimes, and that's just something that didn't happen in the original Dooms. And then you have the music, which is pretty minimal. I mean, it's not bad. The Doom 3 theme that it plays at the main menu is actually pretty nice. It's got that definite metal stuff going on. It's definitely very Doom-ish for a more modern era, but the rest of the music in the game is just kind of like, whatever. So overall, presentation's a little mixed. Now, with Doom 3, what it really comes down to are the story and the gameplay. Now, I say story because they actually really tried to throw this in our faces this time around. They really tout their storyline, despite it being crap. Basically, the Union Aerospace Corporation is doing experiments on Mars, and you're an unnamed space marine that happens to be stationed there. And you've just been transferred, you just arrived. And so you're the new Doom guy. And all of a sudden, UAC's experiments go horribly awry, and all of a sudden they've opened a gate to hell, the demons are invading, and you basically have to go close the gate and survive. That's kind of it, and it's a pretty stupid storyline because they keep trying to shove it down your throat. If we just knew that was the framework and that was it, then we'd be fine. But we constantly get reminders of, hey, there's a storyline! Because you'll go along and you'll collect PDAs, which you do need to update your security clearance to get into different areas. It's basically the new equivalent of keycards, only much more annoying, to be honest with you. Which is really ironic. You wouldn't think that finding PDAs would be more annoying than finding keycards, but it actually is. But still, you go around and you find these PDAs, and they'll have audio logs on them, they'll have emails, and there'll be all this backstory that's really unnecessary. It's just like, why is this here? I mean, some of it's just there so you can actually get to secret areas. Maybe you enter a code and it opens this cabinet that has extra ammo or a weapon in it or something like that. And some of that's okay, but really, a lot of it just feels tacked on and unnecessary, and that's kind of how the whole storyline ends up being. So then you focus on the gameplay itself, which is kind of a mixed bag. On the one hand, it's not a bad first-person shooter, everything actually flows quite nicely. It's got its actiony moments. There's never any moment where it really feels like your gunplay is wrong. I mean, the gunplay is very nice, despite having the reloads, despite being a very different style from Doom 1 and 2. Multiplayer is surprisingly fun, despite being extremely simplistic. When this game was released, it only had deathmatch, and it was only up to 4 players, so it was completely pointless to actually play it online. And this was just a complete farce when it came out in terms of the multiplayer, because people were like, why is there only 4 players? Is it just engine limitations or whatever? They eventually did up it, I believe, to 8. But still, the multiplayer is a joke. I mean, it's not bad multiplayer, don't get me wrong. It's pretty good deathmatch, actually. But it's just really simplistic, and in a world where you have stuff like Call of Duty, Battlefield, even Halo, it just feels just not really up to par. It's just kind of weak. Like I said, though, it is fun when it works, and it does have a lot of lag problems online. But anyway. But the single player consists mostly of running into these really tight corridors, blasting occasionally whatever gets in your way, really. And to be honest with you, that's kind of not what Doom's all about. There were corridors, sure, but there was a lot of wide open areas with lots of enemies coming at you. And that was one thing that Doom 3 really lacked. It's got very sparse enemy placement. Occasionally you'll end up in an area where there are a decent number that attack you, but never anything like what they had in the original Doom games. And this translates to a complete lack of difficulty. Most enemies can be annihilated by circle strafing. That's pretty pathetic. I mean, you could do that in Doom 1 and 2, but there were enough enemies that it made it actually difficult to pull off. Whereas in this one, there are so few enemies, and there's really just not all that much that you have to worry about. So even on the hardest difficulty settings, it's really kind of easy. I mean, it's not brutally easy or anything. It's fairly easy. And that kind of bothered me. It shouldn't end up like that. And because you have all these tight corridors, your weapon of choice is going to be the shotgun, and it's still ungodly overpowered. I mean, it was pretty powerful in Doom 1 and 2, but eventually you'd get weapons that would outclass it. Whereas in Doom 3, you never really do find anything that outclasses it. I mean, the plasma gun's useful later on. The BFG is kind of pointless, to be honest with you. Whereas in Doom 1 and 2, it actually had a use where you were going up against a large number of enemies, and it would take them all out at once. In Doom 3, it's kind of pointless. It's just kind of this really powerful plasma gun that shoots explosive rounds. It's really not that impressive, which is kind of sad, but oh well. And that's kind of the problem I have with this whole game. It's not a terrible first-person shooter, but it's definitely not Doom. I mean, Doom definitely does not have you switching between a flashlight and a gun every time you want to see where you're going. That was one thing I really despised about this game. For some reason, they've never heard of this magical invention called duct tape on Mars in the future. They've never heard of this. So you have to switch between a flashlight and a gun whenever you want to see where you're going, because it's so ungodly dark all the time. Even at the max gamma, it's really dark, so you have to switch to your flashlight a lot. And when you got your flashlight out, you can't use your gun, so whenever you run into an enemy, you have to quickly switch back to your whatever gun you were using and hope to God it wasn't the rocket launcher if they're in close quarters. This becomes a pretty big problem later on. But as a first-person shooter, Doom 3's not bad. I mean, it's pretty average for the time. And I really can't see how all the reviewers that were stuff like IGN and all them were so blown away by it. I mean, sure, the visuals were great. The engine itself was really solid at the time. But the gameplay's just not that fun. The story's stupid. The gameplay it really isn't Doom. It's just your standard corridor shooter with really dumb AI and really easy fights and just a lot of bad choices in the design. And that becomes a problem. It really doesn't show off the engine as well as it should, and that kind of was its downfall when Half-Life 2 came out. But still, Doom 3 is not terrible, but it's definitely no Doom game, and if you're a Doom fan, I would advise avoiding it. But I give it a 2.5 out of 5. Thanks for watching.